I think that that's encouraging. The world changed in November. When Donald Trump got elected in the United States. And I think the Canadian sentiment has changed.
The environmental issues, this is why it's great to have Indigenous partners at the table. They can help with the rooting and help it deal with the issues on the ground. So I know that there'll have to be a few things that get modified, but I think that we can get to a yes.
Alberta has just ignited the biggest political fire in decades, not with empty speeches, but with a massive steel pipeline. Premier Danielle Smith has officially greenlit what she calls a nation-building project, a 42-inch wide pipeline capable of transporting 1 million barrels of oil per day to global markets. This is not just another infrastructure project, it's an economic declaration of independence, an ultimatum to Ottawa: support us or get left behind.
Valued at over $20 billion, this new Alberta pipeline is set to run straight to Prince Rupert or Kitimat in British Columbia, whichever port gives the fastest approval. The goal is crystal clear: direct exports to Asia and Europe, bypassing both U.S. refineries and Ottawa's slow bureaucratic approval process.
Danielle Smith and Alberta has, and the Alberta oil industry has, is who's going to build the pipeline. The TMX pipeline expansion is a cautionary tale. It's enormously expensive. It went from about $4.7 billion with final completion costs almost $35 billion.
This is no trial balloon. Alberta already produces 4.2 million barrels of oil per day, over 1.5 billion barrels annually, volumes comparable to many OPEC nations. This pipeline alone promises an additional 1 million barrels per day, translating into $20 billion in annual revenue.
Alberta isn't just looking overseas, it has been quietly locking in direct agreements with the United States, effectively making its already massive oil exports to U.S. refineries, currently 80% of Alberta's total oil exports, official, permanent, and more profitable.
If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the Northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition.
Premier Smith has reportedly met with high-level American officials, including Dan Brouillette, former U.S. Energy Secretary, who hinted at the potential revival of the Keystone XL pipeline, a project canceled by Washington under President Biden. This isn't a rumor anymore, it's a bilateral side deal, like two neighbors agreeing to fix a shared road because the landlord upstairs refuses to repair the leaking roof. Smith is no longer waiting for federal approval. Alberta has given Ottawa a 6-month ultimatum to either cooperate or step aside. The frustration is justified. In the past decade, Ottawa has blocked or canceled over $500 billion in energy infrastructure projects, including Keystone, Northern Gateway, and Energy East. These lost opportunities cost Alberta an estimated $55 billion in GDP every year and left millions of barrels of oil trapped underground. While Ottawa continues to talk about reconciliation for headlines, Alberta is putting it in writing, in contracts. Smith announced $3 billion in real equity stakes for Indigenous communities participating in the pipeline project, not token payouts, not staged photo ops, but ownership and seats at the decision-making table. This flips the old model. Indigenous nations, once protesters, are now business partners and co-investors, giving the project local stability Ottawa has failed to achieve for decades. Beyond this single pipeline, Alberta is advancing the Western Energy Corridor, a network stretching from Alberta through Prince Rupert to Churchill, Manitoba. If successful, Alberta won't just supply Canada, it will directly access global markets. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are reportedly ready to join, forming a quasi-autonomous economic alliance in Western Canada.
She's set to appear Wednesday at the Global Energy Show in Calgary. Part of her keynote address will be built up around the argument a new pipeline is part.
To counter environmental criticism, Alberta is rolling out its own green transition. The province has set a target of net zero oil sands by 2050, a plan funded and executed without Ottawa's involvement. Alberta is investing heavily in carbon capture, direct air capture, and cleaner energy imports, and it has joined the Pathways Alliance, a coalition of top oil sands producers leading decarbonization. Smith's message is blunt: we're doing this for the future, not for political points. Alberta is doing what no Canadian province has dared to do before, rewriting the rules of the Federation. This is not just a pipeline, this is a political declaration forged in steel, a warning to Ottawa that time is running out. A signal to the US and the world that Alberta is ready to become an independent energy superpower. The real question is no longer, will Alberta dare to do this? It is, what can Ottawa do to keep Alberta before it's too late?
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says a proposal for a new oil pipeline in Canada is highly likely. His words. Former Energy Secretary under Donald Trump, Dan Brouillette, joins me now. So Dan, if it happens, and that's a big if, What does that mean for American energy?
The East-West Pipeline, a project that might appear to be a domestic infrastructure effort by Ottawa, is in reality a signal. With every weld placed and every kilometer completed, what the United States hears is not just construction, but the sound of losing control. For decades, Washington got used to Canada's crude flowing south, a setup that allowed the U.S. to regulate, distribute, and profit from its intermediary position. But the East-West Pipeline threatens to erase that role with a single route, from Alberta to British Columbia, straight out to the Pacific. And once the eastern segment connects to Quebec and the Atlantic, Canadian oil could bypass the U.S. entirely. Refineries in Texas, shipping ports in Louisiana, export hubs in Illinois, all risk becoming obsolete. In Washington, optimists once believed Canada wouldn't dare detach itself from the U.S. market. But Ottawa isn't just daring. They are actively designing a future where the United States no longer figures into the energy equation. And it couldn't come at a worse time. With Trump-era tariffs on steel, auto parts, and energy imports, Canada has stopped responding with statements and started responding with pipelines. As the flow begins to shift, countries across Asia, Japan, South Korea, even China, are quietly drafting new MOUs with Canada. They no longer need an American middleman. What they need is stability, a partner who doesn't change strategy with every election cycle. Ottawa is proving it can be that partner. American refineries are already feeling the heat. Several facilities in the Midwest report production drops of up to 14% due to inconsistent feedstock. Input costs are rising, but more than that, what's rising is uncertainty. When contracts are no longer long-term, when supply routes can reverse at any moment, the real damage isn't just to profits, it's to strategic planning. It doesn't end with oil. States like Texas and Louisiana are reevaluating expansion plans for petrochemical zones. Without preferred access to Canadian crude, investment becomes a gamble. Meanwhile, in Brussels and Seoul, new negotiations are underway. Notably absent, the United States. Present, Canada, offering 10-year energy supply guarantees and preferential deals under new free trade frameworks. And while Congress debates tariffs and domestic job quotas, the rest of the world is redrawing energy routes. The U.S. once played the gatekeeper of North American refining. But when Canada finds its own door to the ocean, that gatekeeping power vanishes. No announcement, no sanctions, just a silent transition. One shipment, one contract, one rerouted barrel at a time. Behind the scenes, geopolitical ripple effects are mounting. Analysts in Washington warn that Canada could leverage this new independence to deepen its energy alliances with the EU or Indo-Pacific region. If Canada secures long-term deals with South Korea or Germany, backed by East-West capacity, the U.S. risks being left out of the next generation of energy partnerships. No longer a hub, no longer essential, just another bidder in a competitive, oversupplied market. Even more concerning is the long-term erosion of influence. When energy is no longer tied to American infrastructure, neither are the geopolitical favors that come with it. The East-West Pipeline could mean less U.S. leverage in diplomatic deals, and fewer incentives for allies to align with Washington when global tensions rise. The East-West Pipeline isn't just infrastructure, it's a symbol of a partner quietly slipping out of reach. While the U.S. closes doors, Canada is laying tracks, quite literally, toward a more independent energy future. Washington may respond with retaliation, pressure, or rhetoric. But the question is, when the world already has an alternative route, who's really going to come back? And if the middleman role is gone, if reliability is broken, if tariffs are driving partners away instead of bringing them closer, then the U.S. is no longer the hub. It's just a stop, forgotten, bypassed, on a route it once controlled.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is hitting the road this summer to hear directly from Albertans. She'll be chairing a panel of experts and community members. Their goal, to send a message to the Prime Minister about the province's role in Canada.
Canada has faced political standoffs before, but what Premier Danielle Smith is pushing right now, it feels different. It feels bigger. Is Alberta quietly setting the stage to topple Ottawa's grip on the provinces, piece by piece? This isn't some fringe conspiracy. In July 2025, Smith publicly called for constitutional talks among provincial premiers, the first serious push of its kind since the failed Charlottetown Accord in 1992. On paper, it's just a discussion about provincial autonomy. But beneath the polite language, critics see something else, a coordinated power shift that could redraw Canada's political map.
The Alberta Next panel will put Albertans in the driver's seat. It will give them the rightful opportunity to decide how Alberta can become stronger and more sovereign within a united Canada.
And Smith isn't making this move in a vacuum. She's already shaken Canada's energy politics with her plan for a privately funded 1 million barrel a day oil pipeline straight to British Columbia's northwest coast. Now, she's going after something even bigger than pipelines. She's going after the very rules that define who gets to control Canada's future. Smith never uses the word secession. She doesn't need to. Her message is sharp enough. Alberta should replace the RCMP with a fully provincial police force. Alberta should pull out of the Canada Pension Plan, CPP, building its own pension system run by Albertans, for Albertans. Alberta should take direct control of more tax revenues, cutting Ottawa out as much as possible. Individually, these ideas aren't new, but Smith isn't treating them as isolated reforms. She's packaging them as a constitutional fight, and she's calling on other provinces to join her. Political insiders say the timing is no accident. Western anger against Ottawa has been simmering for years, boiling over as federal regulators killed project after project. Keystone XL, Energy East, Northern Gateway, costing billions in lost investment. Smith is stepping into that anger and turning it into something more dangerous, a movement. The response from the West was immediate. Saskatchewan and Manitoba lined up behind Smith almost overnight. Both provinces have long complained about Ottawa's unfair transfer payments and tight grip on resource development. British Columbia is still hesitating, but insiders say Premier David Eby has privately admitted he's open to listening if the talks remain privately funded and don't carry federal backlash. That's enough to terrify Ottawa. Because if BC steps in, Ottawa could find itself politically cornered in its own country, facing a united Western Bloc controlling much of Canada's energy and agriculture. One Saskatchewan official, speaking off the record, summed it up bluntly: "If this convention succeeds, we won't need Ottawa's permission to run our provinces anymore." That single sentence, already making headlines, sparked a wave of speculation. Is Canada still a united country, or already just a loose collection of provinces pretending to be one? Underneath all the polite constitutional language, this is about power. And power, in Canada, means oil. Alberta controls 165 billion barrels of recoverable oil, worth nearly $9 trillion at current prices. Ottawa's environmental rules and regulatory delays have left much of it trapped, cutting Canada out of billions in revenue every year.
So much has been made of our relationship here in British Columbia with Alberta. At the time, best of friends, travel buddies, those who share the Rocky Mountains, at times fierce enemies, largely around politics, specifically when it comes to oil.
Smith's answer? Build Alberta's own future, without federal money, without federal approval. Her pipeline plan, fully funded by private investors and Indigenous equity, is already moving forward. If it works, it will prove something Ottawa dreads, that provinces don't need the federal government to build generational wealth. Some analysts have already called this the opening act of an oil-fueled power revolution. Ottawa can tighten its rules all at once, but Alberta now has both the money and the political will to break free. Smith insists this is not about separation. She uses phrases like provincial freedom and taking responsibility for our own future. But many of the people showing up at her Alberta Next town halls are longtime Wexit supporters, Western separatists who openly dream of cutting Alberta out of Confederation entirely. That's why her constitutional push feels so dangerous to Ottawa. Even if Smith isn't planning Wexit herself, she's giving separatists a legitimate political pathway to push for it. And Smith's careful ambiguity only fuels the fire. Is she just bargaining for better deals with Ottawa, or quietly laying the groundwork for Alberta to go its own way? No one can say for sure. And that uncertainty is exactly what's making this debate explode.
Embraced by other Indigenous leaders, and I'm looking forward to partnering with them on major economic projects like the one we're proposing, where there's going to be a very large benefit.
Alberta hasn't left Canada, not yet. But if Smith succeeds in pulling multiple provinces into constitutional talks, she'll set a precedent Ottawa can't control. Provinces deciding for themselves how much power they'll give to the federal government and how much they'll keep. Smith calls it a return to true provincial independence. Ottawa calls it a direct threat to national unity. The real question isn't whether these talks will happen. They're already in motion. The question is this: if Alberta succeeds, who's next? Saskatchewan? Manitoba? Even British Columbia? And when that day comes, will Canada still be a united country? Or just a fragile patchwork of provinces quietly pulling apart, one constitutional meeting at a time?